Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that will work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable coaching to learn more.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Joel Graber. He's the founder CEO over at Modern Outbound, and he sounds like Luke or Owen Wilson. You let me know which one you think. Joel, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Appreciate this somewhat kind of compliment. I'll take it. I'll take anything I can get these days.
All right. We're going to talk copywriting for Outbound today. I'm really excited because I think anytime I can have a chat with somebody who has written, so much cold email or as much or similar level as myself, it's always fun to kind of see how other people do it to get another perspective. This is probably something that most of the listeners have already done or tried themselves, but I find having different perspectives, different frameworks, different ways of approaching things always opens up and unlocks a new idea for me. And so if you're listening and you're like, I've got some copy to write, or I've got a sequence, or I've got a follow-up email, or I've got anything that you're writing to a prospect or a customer, this is going to be a great episode to tune into.
Yep, excited to chat about it.
Totally. We're going to talk about rules. You're going to teach me copywriting. We're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of copywriting. But before we jump in, talk to me about the rules of writing outbound copy.
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, there's messaging, which is kind of formulaic in a way, like who's my target? What is their life situation, their day-to-day? What do they complain about? And that's foundational. And then there's copy, which is an art form, really. So like everybody here who's listening has probably written copy to some degree. Maybe it's worked, maybe it hasn't. So everything I say is based on things that really works for us. At Modern Outbound, we run lots of campaigns for a healthy client base. So we try to use the data, the first party data that we get on this. So, you take things, you could take them literally, you could take it with a grain of salt, but just sharing what works. I think in general, what I've seen work really well is getting beyond like the words on the page. Like, yes, you want to keep things really short and to the point, and you don't want to overwhelm the reader, right? Because when people feel like they can't finish something, they're probably not going to even start. So they're going to probably look to like the left side of the page maybe and scan down. They're going to look for the white space to see if can I get a quick essence of like what this is and decide if I should take action. But I think the biggest thing when you send an email to somebody or anything that's cold, there's like three things that happen. They say, am I safe right now? Like, is this person a scammer? Right? That's like the thing.
Is there a virus here?
Yeah. Is there a virus? Like, is this email legit? Is this a legit sender? Like, they don't even know they're asking that question. It's just programmed. It just happens. Then they say, do I trust this person? So they might scan the copy. Does this look spammy? Are there like a lot of bolded words with links? Like, are they saying they're going to guarantee stuff? Things are free. There's like lots of emojis and percentage signs. And they're like, if your copy looks like that, you're probably not going to pass that like trust test. They're going to say, all right, this is just another kind of like used car salesman or, spammy insurance salesman. Nothing against insurance salesmen, but they'll write emails like that.
You get the general
pass that point. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, if you can pass the safety, right? You could pass the trust. I trust this person. Then they ask, okay, can this person help me? Like, can this person actually help me? And that is when you get into the actual like written word of like, what is the messaging that pops off the page? So try to get there as quickly as possible, I guess is what I'm saying. Brevity, they need to be able to read it quickly. They need to know that you're competent. And I think this is so I'll go through the 4 or 5 that like really drives a lot of our copy. Brevity, competence. Are you using insider language, which is kind of connected to competence in a way? Are you disrupting the pattern? Like, have they seen this email 60 other times today? And do you sound like a human being, right? So even if you had 1 or 2 of those things, it's probably not good enough. You kind of need all those things for them to say, wow, I'm going to jump out of whatever I'm doing today, and I'm going to respond to this. I think those are the big principles, right? I think the mistake that people make in writing copy, and maybe it's because people writing it are like entry level, and maybe they don't really trust themselves, and they've been tasked to do this, and it's like a little bit above their pay grade, but they don't exude competence like in the actual email itself. Like, or it doesn't sound peer to peer. Kind of feels like I'm this like entry level person that's like speaking up to you, and like I hope you respond. Like I hope we can have a conversation here.
Please.
That first impression is critical. Please. Yeah, please respond to me. It's like a neediness that, like, you've seen those emails. Like they jump off the page, right?
Yeah. Or it's the guy who doesn't stop talking. You know, like the salesperson. You're like, you see him at, Best Buy, and you're like, hey, how's it going? Can I help you? And you're like, no. And they're like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna keep going. You're like, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a little too much too soon.
Yeah. If I see that in an email, I'm like, it's that guy.
No.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, they're going to judge you really quickly. In the same way, there's a lot of psychology behind this. Obviously, like people are going to make first impressions about you when they meet you at a party, when they read something that you wrote, whatever that first impression is, whether it's a written word or in person or on the phone. Like they're making a judgment call very quickly. If you sound needy, if you sound entry level, if you're like, it's going to be hard. You better have something really good, like a brand new free car, like in the garage that you can like show them a picture of. So that first impression is critical. And insider language is a really, really big one. So that's just the other principle here is like how do they phrase their problem? Because
I've heard the advice that you want your email to look and sound like their regular email traffic. So you want to disguise it in, if they're sending in, if they're a Microsoft shop and everybody around them sends through Microsoft, then you want to have the Microsoft fonts.
Right.
And you want to send it, you want to write it like somebody who is going to email this individual every single day. You want it to look like the color, the font, the words, the phrase, the level of, what's the word? Not complexity, but formality in the email.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
Dear sir or madame.
Right. Yeah. If it has like Prim from Maria vibes, like it's over. Right. But I think it's a really good point so maybe even upgrade to say like the best pattern interrupt initially is no interrupt at all, like business as usual. Right. They just see a boring lowercase subject line, 2 or 3 words, nothing like a bait and switch. You're not lying. You're just being kind of vague. You just want them to open the email, but they still see that opening line. So that opening line is so critical, right? It's something that we obsess over here. And there's so many different ways to do that opening line. And that opening line tactic changes all the time because once they get used to seeing that same thing, like, hey, notice you're like the job title lowercase at company name. That could work in certain industries where they're not bombarded with emails. But if you're hitting up like a CMO or a VP of sales, like dude, they've seen it.
Anybody in SaaS,
they've seen it. Like, so if you just said you just led with the problem, you didn't even necessarily lead with their role. You just know that their role struggles with this. Like if somebody messaged me and said, hey, I know copywriting is a tough part to offload in lead gen. Like I would nod my head and say, yeah, it is. That's why everybody here, that's why it's a huge focus here. But you clearly know me versus, hey, as the CEO of Modern Outbound, you might care a lot about copywriting. I probably wouldn't open that email.
Yeah. So I think just if I could summarize, it's hygiene factors first. And I'm using the hygiene factors like the psychological principle of hygiene factors that I barely remember from college, but it was they can't add any satisfaction. They can only remove satisfaction from a workplace. You can only remove deliverability, or you can only kill your reply rate. You cannot improve it. And that's the hygiene factors are making it look like, the emails that you usually see, keeping it not so many words, not spammy, no any of this. And then there's the so you basically get out of the way, show that, hey, I know the game here. And then you're kind of optimizing for, let's get to the most relevant piece of the offer of the email as quickly as possible. Get out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Give them everything they need very quickly to make a decision and move on. Obviously, it's a delicate ecosystem. Like, can you actually get in their primary inbox? How does the list actually get built, right? Mm-hmm. And then what does it actually say? It's like kind of a 3-pronged thing, and they all work together. But and that's the other thing we could talk about is how that list actually gets built. I think there's a lot of talk, of personalization, which I think we should chat about, because I think there's some misnomers there on what personalization is. Like, so to me, personalization is a mechanism of being personal. Like, you can be personal, but not have the email traditionally personalized, if you know what I mean. Like if I call out like your college mascot or like where you went to school, but it's not tied into the value prop, like, I don't think anyone's going to care. Like, I think they've seen that. And it's like, okay, I guess you did a little bit
of my LinkedIn.
Yeah, you read my LinkedIn, or you saw that I posted something. But I always think of it as like, if you had like a really bad headache that was just like splitting, you didn't know why, and like you went to a bunch of doctors and nobody could figure it out, and somebody emails you one day and they're like, "Hey, I'm an MD. I practice actually in your city. We've been getting a lot of complaints about people that have these unexplained headaches. It happens like in the front of your forehead, like your temple. Like, is that what you're feeling?" Like, you would not care if that person knows you, if like they read your LinkedIn. Like, yes, can you help me? So if you can directly correlate like that, like, so you're going to get a response. You'll get something.
100%. And I think there's two pieces here. I think a lot of people over index on personalization, and I suspect it's the SDRs, SDR managers that are limited in the flexibility or freedom to target whatever industry or market. You know, if you're locked in and your boss says, "Hey, we're going after this market, here are your set accounts," targeting doesn't really come top of mind. This is a lot more relevant, I think, to brand, like newer teams or teams that have a little bit wider open market where things aren't quite locked in on rails. Because I 100% agree with what you're saying, that it's that those personalization, the mascot, the crocodile in the office email, the first name in the subject line kind of things, attention hacks that have worked in the past, and they probably will work again once they get a little bit rested. And if you go outside of SaaS into like manufacturing or something that doesn't get as many emails, they'll probably still work. But I do think, especially, in our business, we do a lot of helping companies on both sides of the podcast here. We both help a lot of companies kind of build their first outbound channel, build their first channel outside of inbound, word of mouth. And at that stage, I would argue that the targeting, or the combination of the targeting and the messaging, is more important. I can send a mediocre message to the perfect audience and I'm going to get pretty good results. Or I could send a perfect email to a farmer in Nebraska,
right,
which isn't going to get it doesn't matter how good my personalization is. "Oh, I bet you got a tractor like this, yada, yada, yada." If I'm not selling anything related to farming or ag, I'm not going to get a reply.
Yeah, I agree with that. The list is everything. And I think you make a really good point that sometimes SDRs are limited in their ability to really spread their wings on relevance. So maybe that's how SDRs of the future, or good ones now, will be used, is like plug them into a very thoughtful machine where all the verticals and industries are set out, the multiple decision makers at each account, whether it's finance, operations, HR, and they're all focused with different lines of messaging, and those SDRs get plugged in to work those accounts by calling, maybe looking up like a K1 or I'm sorry, a 10K, not K1. It's tax season.
Close enough.
Yeah. Or things on LinkedIn or their website. But yeah, I think SDRs need to be plugged into a very, very well built out machine that has already thought about all the relevant triggers that they can leverage. So I agree with that.
100%. I think it's like sailing a boat, right? It doesn't matter how good the sailing, like the crew is. If you're going in the wrong direction, you're going in the wrong direction. And I think one thing that SDR leaders take the blame for, and outbound shops, like us in some cases, can get the blame for, is like, "Hey, you did a great job of executing, but you're pointing in the wrong direction." It's like, well, I might be the captain of the ship, but you're the one that hired the boat and like told me you wanted to sail to this island. We sailed to this island and there was nothing there. So like,
yeah, I know. It's sad for those SDRs. I honestly, we work with a lot of clients that have the best of intentions, but they'll either hire SDRs full-time in-house before they work with us. And those poor people come in to an unwinnable situation and then they get let go because they didn't inherit any kind of a system. And I talk a lot about this, like on LinkedIn. It's just like, how do you build the system where you can just plug and play so that at least they have a chance? You're giving them a chance. So yeah, it's a tough one.
a very tough one. So we're talking about segmenting the list. What's your, I don't know, rules around segmentation? Are you let's do a huge list and kind of cut it down? Do you like to do 16 tiny little niche campaigns at the same time? Help me understand kind of the way you think about it here.
Yeah, it's a great question. We like to be tactical right out of the gate, and we lean into, so like with clients, they'll fill out an onboarding assessment, they'll meet with my copywriting team, but we'll lean into like those most compelling angles or pain points or whatever you want to call them, and we'll pull the roles most affected by those angles, right? So we'll start with like 3 or 4 campaigns that are usually role driven. I find that we do company lookalikes and things like that. I think that's helpful, especially if you're reaching out to like a CEO at a small company, that the CEO and the company is one entity. It's one thing. Like they care about the strategy and the vision. But as you go up the spectrum on size, people get a little selfish, right? They care about their own, accolades and their ability to get promoted. And so I find that the role-driven campaigns, like kind of speaking to their, I don't want to say selfish incentives, but what they care about, works well. And then find triggers. So like company, like account type, like find lookalikes, find that specific vertical. What kinds of fintech are these? Like API fintech companies, you're reaching out to a newly appointed CFO or VP of finance, and they've raised a Series A. You're not necessarily calling that out that they've raised a Series A. It's more of like a background, like intent signal that
I know, and that's why I'm reaching out, but I'm not going to call it out.
Exactly. Yeah. You want them to just head nod without you writing it specifically. Like that just would be like, okay, this is like timely. Yeah. And I think that's however many triggers you can find, like department size. Are they growing? Are there signals on headcount growth? Like I kind of think of it as like core is role, industry, vertical, account type. That's core, right? And then bonus points, if you can find some kind of like trigger overlay of like, is this person new to the seat because they're going to spend most of their budget in that first year? And that's a really good time to reach out to them. Do they have a really small department size? Like, do they have a tiny finance team, right? They have like 1 or 2 people that are just like running ragged. They don't have a tech stack. Like I'm assuming this would be like something for a CFO stack. Try to find those triggers so that you could subtly mention some of those in the copy. But we like to be like very active. So usually after like 2 or 3 months of working with a client, like we could have upwards of 15, 20 different campaigns, maybe even more across email and LinkedIn channels. Because I feel like it's a feedback machine. I think you have lots of different variations going out, which shocks the server. It's good for deliverability too, just to have lots of different variations, custom variables, different ways of messaging. It's like, okay, this is like a big operation, but it also gives us feedback within weeks of like, okay, this works. Like sequence A to that mid-level finance person, like it's just working better. It's the side door in, they're introducing us to the CFO, but in some other case, it might be top down. But you only know that if you can like test the hell out of everything. Even within those campaigns, like run lots of A, B, C, D, E, F testing, not just split testing, like have 5, 6, 7 variations, each testing a different angle. Great. Angle A works better. Like that's an automation that they really care about. The money saving part where they can replace part of their stack, like that's not really resonating as well, right? Then you double down with future campaigns. So
yeah,
that's generally how we do it. If you have a decent size addressable market.
So focus on the company contact targeting criteria, look for relevant signals or triggers that might indicate, hey, they're a little bit more likely. And then you're starting with a few campaigns, but by the end of the couple of months you're working with them, or not by the end, but by the kind of 3-4 month mark, you've got 10 campaigns, 20 campaigns going.
Yeah.
Or that you've run.
That we're currently actively running. And then this is important for sales teams that are doing this on their own. Like you've got to go in and look at the several campaigns that you're running and ruthlessly get rid of stuff that's not working. Because again, if you're hammering the same message over and over again to the audience that's just not responding, your reply rate's going to drop, your sender score, your IP health is going to drop. Like it's just has horrible implications. Like I come into these situations a lot where they're like, yeah, we're like running all this like stuff. Like we've got these campaigns. I'm like, great, your reply rate is like 0.8%, right? And you've been running that at decent volume for like a few months. Like you guys are kind of effed right now. You got to like you got to get rid of this. Like, turn it off. Just stop. It's actually better to stop completely, and overhaul this stuff. So like, we'll do that with clients. Like, if we're getting them decent lead flow, but not quite where we need to be, like, we'll overhaul. And it's a lot of extra work, obviously, but I find that sometimes it's that 8th or 9th campaign that you run based on the learnings and your conversations with the client, with each other. Like, okay, that 9th campaign really crushes. And then that's the spawn of like a bunch of new lookalike campaigns. So it's just it's a lot of testing. This is very different to marketing emails where, they send like one canned boilerplate template to 20,000 people. You don't want to do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about lookalike audiences earlier. I wanted to pick your brain here. I've tried some are better than others. When you say lookalike audiences, tell the audience what that means. And then I'd love to hear if you're using a specific tool or process for developing that.
Yeah, definitely. This is a big one, especially in onboarding. Like, we've been doing it more recently where we ask the client like who their top 2 clients are. And we'll use a tool. Apollo has certain functionality like this, but now we've been using Ocean. Ocean.io has a really, really good lookalike functionality. Like, they look for context. So it's not just like keywords, but they use AI for context. And initially I kind of thought it was like BS, but it actually,
right on.
So we use that as part of our stack, and we'll pull accounts there. So if it's like, I don't know, give me an example. If it's like an HR tech, like, hey, our best client is in the HR tech space with this kind of, this is their offering, this is their headcount, this is their revenue, these are the other services, ancillary services they provide. And like, you can put in a lot of keyword work with Ocean, and it'll give you it'll spit out some lookalike accounts. Nice. And you use that as like social proof, because I think people, there's a lot of malpractice with social proof. Like, you hype up things a little too much, too much ROI language, too much guarantee, hey, we did this for another company and they grew by, 800%. Like, nobody buys it anymore. But if you find a lookalike account, like, hey, we worked with client X, they're in your space, we were able to deploy XYZ for them across all these locations, whatever the value prop is, like, now they feel like you're in their tribe. Like, okay, they know that these guys know me and they work with a client like me. So there's even a little bit of FOMO there too. So try to use databases to try to use databases and focus on their strengths. Don't use the weak parts of their the weak parts of their functionality. There's some things that an Apollo is very good at, or a ZoomInfo is very good at, but other things not as good. Like, I find intent data to be a little garbagey, actually. I think it's a little bit of snake oil.
I think it's a whole lot of snake oil and a ton of bullshit. I don't know. I've talked to one person, lifetime, that said, oh yeah, I had a campaign where like intent data increased it a little bit.
I'm shocked you got a story like that. Okay. All right.
Because I test it with every outbound person that comes on the show, everybody I meet through the sales process here, Predictable Revenue. They talk about certain providers and the intent data. I'm like, hey, you have access to, this tool. They say they sell big on intent data. Have you used it? Tell me more. Like, I don't believe it works, but I'm also at the same time open to the fact that it does work. So if anybody's listening to the podcast, they're like, hey, idiot, it does work.
Right.
Let me show you. I would love to hear from you, because I haven't seen any good examples of it working.
I would love to see it too. And I actually posted about it today. And like, I left that open. Like, if there is somebody that has a success story, like, I'd love to see it. Third party intent. Look, we all know first party intent data is great. They visited your site, they filled out a form, cool. But the keyword stuff, especially at the enterprise level, like, I just haven't heard it. I have a client that I've been working with for a couple of years. They're a procurement tech platform, and they just raised a Series B, and they're dropping like $90K or $100K on, I won't say the platform, intent data, and it's like, okay, good luck. I wish you well. I hope it works and we can coexist with it. But Apollo has that now. ZoomInfo has it.
LinkedIn is interesting because they've got it, and it's based on if people searching for keywords like in LinkedIn and posting about stuff in the LinkedIn, which I think is somewhat interesting. And I have run sequences where I got a tiny lift, but it wasn't like a it wasn't a statistically significant signal. It was like, oh, there was a little boost there,
a little bit of a jump,
but it could just be noise in the data, which
that's fair. I don't want to totally disregard an entire category, but yeah, it could be. You could see a little bit of a pop. I just haven't seen it. I haven't. I've seen a lot of money spent on the category.
It was a lot of hype. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of I'm not going to say any names or point any fingers, but if they're selling hard on intent data as like the thing that they're doing, run.
Yeah, run. Exactly. There's no silver bullet at the end of the day. I think everybody's looking for like that magic potion that they can just create and great. Now we have outbound and it works. It's doing the work. Like I think SDRs on board with companies and they spend so much time on the product and like, oh, what does this do? All the functionality and these cool features. Oh, we're going to roll out like 3.0 soon. And like, but they don't spend enough time on the client. Like, are they actually talking to clients? They should be talking to clients that first month. They just ask them questions, interview them. Yeah, like do that. Get their language and then spit it back to lookalikes. Spit it back to other roles that are doing exactly what they do. It doesn't have to be rocket science, but it's doing the work initially, and then it's tweaking the hell out of everything as you run it.
I love it. On that note, I'd love to kind of dive into like teach me your method for copywriting. We talked a little bit about the audience and kind of setting the table there and some of the rules of like avoid the spam words and keep it short and front load the relevance. But when you actually get into writing that email, where do you start?
I think it starts as a stream of consciousness once we've done the homework. Like once we've talked to the client, we've asked them the really good questions about use cases, like who have they worked with? Why did they work with you, right? They fill out a pretty detailed assessment. Like, okay, great. We have all the data. We have industry level articles that are teaching us about just the space in general. And then we start writing. That first email obviously is so critical. So once you nail that, like the methodology here is like, what is the most compelling angle? Is I think you see in a lot of cold emails, like there's like 5 I don't do bullet points, but it'd be like 5 talking points. And now you're basically putting it on the prospect to say, which one do you fit into? Like, here are all the things that we do. What do you fit into? So for us, it's go with the highest conviction angle and then run an ABCD test. So we'll put each angle and each variation, right? Nail that. Okay, we feel really good about that. We're going to run that for a few weeks and see how that does. And then B, that second step might be like a very quick bump. Quick bumps work really well. They still do. I know a lot of gurus don't like them, but if you nailed that first email, it's just pointing their eyes to the first one. So very, very quick bumps work well. But that third email should either be education. It should be like teaching them something. If you can show that you're like a domain expert, like without even like a CTA necessarily, like that's a good framework for that third and fourth message. But I'm also not a fan of like overdoing it on sequence steps. So you've got a lot of people in the team, 10, 20, 30 step sequences. You're going to piss people off and they're going to opt out. By the fourth or fifth step, if they haven't responded, like your engagement's going to drop. So you're wasting precious volume on 4th, 5th, 6th steps. They're going to opt out. Your deliverability drops. So just stop after 4 steps, 5 steps. This is how we do it. And then we'll retarget. We'll wait 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, whatever it is, depending on the audience. Maybe we'll retarget on LinkedIn. Maybe we'll just retarget on email with a fresh slate. And that seems to work. So highest conviction angles, but break them out. And I find the writing style, and I hired a new copywriter who's kind of gets it too. Like just brain dump everything and do like what Stephen King talks about, where he like goes back in and cuts the fluff. He goes in, he used to talk about that. Keep me honest. I feel like you read more Stephen King than me, but I did read that somewhere.
I haven't read any Stephen King, but what that reminded me of is a podcast guest I had a long time ago, Patrick. I can't remember his last name. He wrote the Kill a Word presentation. Have you seen that before?
No. What's that?
Kill a Word.
Kill a Word.
I'll throw the deck in the show notes. It's on SlideShare, and he just talks about how to kill a word. Patrick McLean.
Patrick McLean. I've heard of that dude.
Yeah,
I've never heard.
Well, he's on the podcast. That's where you heard him.
Right. Wait, maybe I'm thinking of different Patrick McLean. Then yeah,
could be.
Send that though. That's interesting. Yeah, cut the fluff.
Totally. The killer word presentation is a really great. We used to use it in our onboarding to show clients that like this is what we mean when we're like, yeah, we're gonna murder some words here. And he's got a bunch of examples. I don't want to steal that, but you can check out the killer word presentation in the slide share. And then if I remember, I'll try and link to Patrick's episode where he came on. I can't remember if it was an episode here or if we did a webinar, but I'll see if I can track it down for you.
It's interesting. I'll check that out. Sometimes the other thing I was going to say, like with cutting fluff, like sometimes the best copy happens on like that 5th iteration, because like sometimes you write copy in a certain mood or like energy state, but it might not resonate as well with you when you read it back the next day or a week later. Like, you know what? Like maybe that's like a little too hypey. There's a little like too much like fluff there, or like flowery language, and like you come back and make little changes and it makes all the difference. You go from like a 1% reply rate to like a 6% reply rate just by shaving out some things and not, like, oh, you know what, I'm bearing the lead here. Like I'm only really referencing how we can help in like that third sentence, fourth sentence, like reorganizing the copy. So
but you got to stream of consciousness first to get there. And then I find I'll write stream of consciousness and then I'll find something at the very bottom. I'm like, that's it. And I'll pull that, I'll delete the rest of the shit, pull that to the top, and then kind of build around there.
Yeah, exactly. And I will also say something that's good to do, and I don't know if all SDRs or AEs have this benefit, or they have like this, I don't know, the luxury to do this, but having other eyes look at the copy is good too. Like people that have a copywriting mind. So like you write the copy and you feel like it's great, and maybe you're like a little emotionally attached to it. But like our process here is like my copywriters write the copy. Maybe this doesn't scale as well, but they always send it to me for final review, and I can always put some like little touches on it, and then maybe even send it back to them to put their touches on it. And by the time it passes through 2-3 hands, like it's pretty damn good. So don't do this in like a siloed like vacuum. Like let other people see it and like revisit it. I see this so often, like they've been running the same template or the same thing for like months and they have not gone back. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's like a little boring to like go back and change a little word, especially if you don't know if it's going to work. So you just don't. But that's critical. Yeah. I mean, that's the game on the copy side of things.
I find I also have to sleep on it at least a night. I'll write it. I'll be excited about it and I'll look at it tomorrow and be like, this is absolute trash.
Yeah.
But there might be something good in there. And so I'll write it, I'll sleep on it, I'll come back the next day. I'm like, okay, what can I kill here? What's real? What's nonsense? Because I find anytime I'm super excited or happy with the first pass of an email I've written, it's not going to do well.
Yeah, right. If you're too happy, it means you're being too nice to yourself. Yeah.
100%. If this is a great email, I'm like, man, this is going to bomb. But if I'm like cautiously like, this might be terrible, those always do really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it shouldn't be that hard to write copy. I think if you've done the homework, like you shouldn't, if you're struggling and you're like, it's like a slog to actually write these sentences out or these points that you want to make, then like you probably need to go back to the drawing board on like, who am I really talking to? Because back to the example I was saying earlier, like it should be as simple as like, you have medication for headache medication for someone that really needs it. Like it should kind of, and I get it, like, long sales cycles, very complex B2B products. I get that. But at the core, like people might buy your product for 1 or 2 reasons max. They're not buying the whole platform. So don't sell the platform.
Totally. Well, I think another piece that I've certainly fallen victim to is thinking that I'm trying to close somebody over email. I'm trying to convince them that, hey, this problem exists. Right. You can't, over a tiny little email with only the same number or fewer words than a tweet, like you can't convince anybody. There's no NLP tricks. There's no like little like word virus I can fire into your head and suddenly I can manipulate you into like being ready. The best thing we can do is qualify for relevance. So like, hey, is this relevant to you right now? Like SDRs don't create demand, they find it. Same with salespeople. Right.
I think it's a great point. Yeah. It's something like in between like a billboard in Times Square and like a full piece, like a white paper or a blog. Like I kind of think of people's inbox when I visualize, when I'm writing emails or my copywriters are, it's kind of like, I don't know, is this their inbox is like a crowded place with lots of billboards with like flying like one-liners and things, and they have to like choose what to pay attention to. Will they pay attention to this? Does this look like all of them? So it's kind of, outbound copy is pretty specialized. Mm-hmm. It isn't, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's the 1-2 punch of like, you only have so much of that preview text to work with. And it's a combination of like it's like a jab, punch, right hook kind of thing, or jab, punch, left hook, depending on, where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But the subject line, the first line, and the CTA, they all kind of have to move in unison and has to feel like a logical, okay, I start here, then I do this, then I do this. And it's leading me in a direction that's going to help take the prospect to go, oh, that's what he's talking about. You're going to create a gap in their mind, or a gap between expectations and reality. Be like, oh, this could be different. Oh, I already have this gap. Oh, I noticed this gap. Cool. How do I solve this? I'll look at the signature, because that's what I really want, is like, I'll put the value prop in the signature. The value prop is the signature. It's the name of the company. It is the thing you do. And I'm not saying like add an actual value prop.
Right,
People are going to make an inference from looking at your company name or the stuff you put there. And like, that's where I want them to take that logical jump of like, hey, do you have this gap? And they look at the signature, they're like, shit, this guy might be able to help me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might be the credibility. You have the credibility in that signature. Like maybe I'm not a fan of links, but maybe a link to the site, because they will want to do some discovery. Even like if you're struggling to write copy, let's just say you're out there, someone listening, and like you're struggling, something that's good if you're like at a startup, there's so many good methodologies, but one is like it's to your point about having like a logical flow. I think that's such an important point. Like make an observation about what they're probably doing in their role. Maybe you talk about your background. If you're like, let's say you're the CEO and like you started this company for some reason, right? Like you saw something in the market, or you were at another job and you were heading up data science at another company, and like there were some good use cases for AI in that, right? So you talk about your background, why that led you to build this product, right? Like what's the connection there? Like, why did I build this? I'm giving you my background. I made the observation about you, like, and even just go for feedback. And then you've got the credibility in the signature line, to your point.
Totally.
The logical flow is critical.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's an important point.
And I was just trying to track it down, but I can't seem to find it right now. What you'd said about if you're struggling to write copy resonated with something that we will a workshop we run clients through, and I've got a blog post about it. And I had Kenny McKenzie on our podcast. He's the one who built this with me. It was kind of an adaptation from our niche matrix from the early days. But basically, we added in like, the company targeting criteria, persona targeting criteria, identifying signals, and that's kind of the targeting hypothesis. And then there's the need hypothesis, and that where we start with what was this person hired to do? So go look at job postings and look at what would be their job definition. The next step is, okay, what is their goal for the year, right? What are their OKRs, their annual rocks? Like, what are the big things that they're trying to accomplish? So you know what the role was hired to do. Now you know what specific thing they're trying to do this year. And then we break it down to the job to be done level. And the job to be done is just a method of describing a specific type of progress that the user or the prospect is trying to make. And so we go, job description, what does it say? Like, what are you responsible for? Goals for the year, specific progress you're trying to make, obstacles, what obstacles or friction are in the way. And then we got a method for breaking that down in terms of like, how do we solve this? And I find if you're really struggling, it's because, to your point, you don't understand those variables enough. And so when you break it down and you go kind of step by step, now all you're trying to do is like, hey, look, here is the pain. How do I answer this in the most succinct way possible?
Yeah, I think that's a great framework. Like, fill that out, and even if it's incremental improvement on one of their metrics, one KPI, one part of like their year-end goal or the jobs to be done, you don't have to transform this person's life. Like, you just have to help them make incremental improvement. And if you can sell them on that incremental improvement, that it's almost more believable. Like, they'll take the call with you.
100%.
I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah, like have them fill it out, right? But it's going to require a lot of recon, and interviews, and like really understanding the industry you're selling to.
Yeah.
Industry level, company level, role level, like they're all factors.
And if you're at all answering in your head right now, because obviously you're not talking to us, but if you're going, oh man, I don't know this, or I have a gap here, Joel's comment earlier is go talk to customers, get away from your desk, walk away and pick up the phone, or go see them in person if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the most valuable learning I've done for our own outbound or for customer development when we're trying to build a product, or, you know, when we're trying to actually, like I've had a struggling client before and I would get on the phone with one of their customers because I was working with a technical founder who was only able to describe the technical elements of the product. And I'm like, we're totally missing the user side here. Give me the name, give me your customer list. I'm just going to call a couple of these people.
Mm-hmm. So
pick up the phone, ask them in their own words, hey, how do you think about this? How do you describe this? And like record it and use the specific phrases that they use about the product or the offering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take notes, do an AI transcriber where you can always have that handy. And just ask them why they bought, like ask a customer, why did you buy us? Like what was happening in your life? Like what? It's disruptive to buy something new. So there must have been something compelling going on. Like I still update my copy to this day. I've been running Modern Outbound for 4+ years. Like I'll hear a client say something about like why they went with us or what they're dealing with internally, like with how they're managing their reps or whatever. And like I'll update my copy. You should be talking, do the demo, go update the copy for the new people, right? It should just be this like carousel of feedback.
It's a really interesting point that I think a lot of sales development teams maybe hesitate to do. Some because they're locked into like, this is the standard messaging, and some because maybe they're a little bit afraid of like, hey, I've got this thing that's working. How frequently do you rotate your copy? And I know we've talked about, you know, the number of different sequences, but say for Modern Outbound, you know, to your point here, you're going to go rotate your copy based on what you heard. How frequently are you doing that?
For Modern Outbound, maybe less so than what we do for clients. It's like, but I would say
Speakers, kids. Yeah,
exactly. Like I have some high conviction campaigns, but I'm not breaking it out in the same way that I do for clients. But yeah, I go in weekly. Usually at the end of the week, I'll do a quick check. Like Friday afternoon, I'll like review what happened that week. What's my sender score? Are my domains in good shape? What's my reply rate? Which ones had an uptick in reply rate? Which campaigns and variations had a down tick, if that's a word, right? And I'll turn off those variations that weren't working as well. I'll literally copy and paste the best ones and maybe build a new campaign, like a new campaign hitting a different decision maker at the same account with maybe some slightly different verbiage around what they care about. But I go in weekly. For clients, we go in multiple times a week. And because for clients, we're doing higher volume each day. So if we're sending 800 to let's say 1,000 emails a day across lots of campaigns for a client, it's big implications if there are variations that aren't working. So we go in throughout the week and like make those little tweaks. So I think, for us, for Outbound, we go, for my own account, I go in quite a bit.
Totally fair. I want to touch on philosophy here. I know we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the things, but I want to touch on philosophy. Then maybe we can jump into, I want to hear more about this 1,000 emails a day here piece, but let's talk about your philosophy of copywriting.
Mm-hmm.
And so help me understand where do you start when you think about that philosophy?
Yeah, well, philosophy to me is just the psychology of it. Like, I think it goes back to like, how are you going to get this person to respond? Like that's all it is. Like, how am I going to get them to respond? Like, because they're just completely overloaded and they've read 300 emails that day. So philosophy, some of the things that we've changed over the years is, and this is a key one, is not over-promising anything, like being quite subtle. Sometimes confidence is subtlety, and that's kind of the same thing. It's a conversational ad, really. You're trying to write like a sort of like a longer form ad where they can talk to the writer. So it's always within that framework. Like, yes, we break out the angles. Yes, we know the person's role. We know the jobs to be done. We know what they care about. Great. But then there's like the actual structure of it. Don't overpromise, be confident, and just be an expert. And if you can teach them something, this is the other piece of like philosophy maybe, or psychology. Like, if you actually teach them something, and I don't mean like add a link to a like 5-page white paper or 5-page blog. I mean, give them like a stat of some kind that they can walk away with. Like if you're a cybersecurity company, you do identity management and you implement systems, you could say like, hey, 90% of IT teams, I don't know if you knew this, but 90% of IT teams don't fully implement an identity management platform because it's too expensive or because they don't have the staff internally to do it. Like, I don't know if that resonates with you. It doesn't look like I did a search. Doesn't look like you're using any identity platforms. Like, you know, you could do the best you can with technographic data. Like that's going to come off as like, this person's an expert of some kind. Like they don't have the, like Josh Braun says, the commission breath. Like they're trying to teach me something. And now I know that. Cool. Like you taught me something. So now there's like reciprocity. Like now I feel like maybe I should give you something, which is maybe a meeting or a conversation, you know?
At the very least, you've established yourself as an expert because you brought something new to the plate.
Yeah, exactly. So try to come at it that way. And you even do that like on your sales calls, like copywriting and the actual discovery call. It's kind of like similar principles in a way. Like don't do a ton of talking or writing, right? Show them that you know them very quickly and like be an expert and teach them something, right? Be a consultant. Like the email should look like you're a consultant, not like you're a salesperson. If it looks like you're a salesperson, then you're probably writing it the wrong way. You probably don't even really know them well enough. If you knew them well enough, you could just consult them.
Totally. Problem solved already.
Yeah, hopefully. I know that's kind of like all over the place, but it's a moving target, you know? The copywriting philosophies are, I don't know, maybe they're different for everybody, but I think you have to build trust like within 2 seconds. So what is it like? I don't know what the stat is. Like you may know this, like 70% of people spend less than like 5 seconds on reading the email.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like that.
Just look at your open rates. You know, like when was the last time you saw 100% open rate on a big campaign, right? So if you just consider that, how many people actually saw the email that you sent to them? You know, I bet you it's probably 25 to 50% more than your actual open rate. So like most people are going to see your email. They're going to see your subject line and that preview text. So they're going to see that, but they're not going to see the rest. That means, you know, when you look at your open rates, it's the combo of the subject line and that preview text.
Well, yeah. So maybe even put something somewhat educational or informative in that opening line versus making an obvious observation that they clearly know. Like you're calling out something that's obvious. Don't be obvious. Give them
kind of VP of sales.
Right. Yes, I am. I should read more about this
for a minute.
Yeah. That tactic, like at one point, I guess it was kind of cute because people had a harder time like putting, you know, personalized variables in there. But like not anymore. It's just table stakes now. So like
totally
go for the kill. Be direct, honestly. That's another way to build trust. Like it's another piece of this philosophy. Like just being really, really direct and not like long-winded and complicated and using like 5th grade words is the best way to build trust. Like how would Mark Cuban write an email? He's not going to use like flowery language. He doesn't have time. He's just going to get right to the point. It's probably going to look like a text message.
It does
in some cases. Yeah. Very quick. Grammar's not perfect, you know, but
he doesn't use punctuation.
He's not using punctuation.
If there's multiple lines in his email, you're going to get multiple emails. I know this. I tried to buy a domain off him once.
Oh, really?
More than I could afford. And I was like,
no way.
For that.
He got back to you though.
Oh, instantly.
Oh, that's cool.
Within
hell yeah
3 minutes. I was like, hey, I see you own this domain. He's like, yep, just don't waste my time unless it's 6 figures. And I was like, this. He's like, that, this, that. That was the conversation.
Oh man, you should use that. Whatever you sent to him, that's a good cold email. Take that. I mean, work up.
I think it was just Mark Cuban. Just he answers email. I was like,
he does.
Can I buy this domain off of you? And he's like, do you have more than $100,000? I was like, I don't think I want to spend $100,000 on a domain today.
It's not that good of a domain. Relax, Mark.
It's not that good.
This isn't Shark Tank. That's pretty cool. I want to email Mark Cuban. I need to say something good to him though. So I'll think of something.
Just say hello.
All right, fine. I'll do that. But yeah, like it's ultimately has to exude confidence. Like confidence is competence, you know. And if you're peer to peer, like people will trust it. Nobody wants to talk to an SDR. I hate to say it. You know, they just don't. Like unless, and maybe I'm making a blanket statement there, unless they have something really good.
I think you could conclusively say nobody wakes up and is like, oh, I hope an SDR calls me. I think everybody would say yes. But what I think I would disagree with, or I think where the nuance is nobody wants to talk to an SDR or a salesperson. Everybody wants to solve a problem. And if you can help them solve a problem, it doesn't matter what the conduit is for that, whether it's an email or a cold call. If I can help you solve a problem, I can help you solve a problem. And when I think about the end value of my product or my solution, then, they want that. They don't want a call. They don't want the mechanism. They don't care about the drill. They want the hole in the wall. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I want to buy a drill.
Right. Yeah. I'm on board with that. Yeah. If like maybe an SDR with a little bit of chutzpah, and a little bit of like speaking above their pay grade or their whatever they are in the hierarchy. Like, yeah, I think if you approach with confidence and you're like, the brevity is there and like, oh, this person like knows what they're doing. I suppose the role doesn't matter as much. But yeah, that's kind of the case. And just make sure that your marketing team isn't writing all of your cold emails either. I think that's another important one.
100%. I mean, nothing against marketing teams.
Nothing against marketing. Love marketers.
It's a different style. And like, unless you're a marketer who's comfortable being uncomfortable, because you're going to look at them. I could show you every email, all of my best performing emails. If you're a marketer and you'd be like, no, not that email.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
That won't work.
Yeah, I think marketers have the best of intentions. I think they're very smart and sharp, but a lot of them are juggling a lot of balls. Like they've got newsletters, they've got other email campaigns that are for inbound, they've got ads they're running, SEO, like they're trying to make it all work.
Keep everything on brand,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to hear about brand in a cold email. It's like, no. Just like you're not going to talk about brand if you're spending money on ads. You're not talking about. I mean, maybe you're doing brand specific awareness,
right? Brand awareness,
but if you're doing like specific conversion oriented ads, then like you're not talking about brand. You're talking about, hey, do you have this pain? Do you need this hole in the wall? Cool, we got a drill to sell you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like we could go on.
We can keep going.
I did promise I would ask you about the sending 1,000 emails a day.
Ooh, yeah.
So you send 1,000 emails a day, 21,000 emails, roughly something a month for a client.
So it'd be more than that. Yeah, across. Yeah, well, I can get it. I don't know the exact number, but let's say we have, 35, 40 companies that we work with. So you do the math. If it's like, sometimes it's 1,100, 1,200 a day. Yeah, it's quite a bit. I think the key is like having good infrastructure. And I know we're talking a lot about copy, but none of your copy matters if you're not getting the primary inbox. So this is definitely important. But deliverability actually really helps with testing. People don't usually make that connection of like, I've got to test the market and I've got to have all these campaigns running. But obviously, if you don't have volume to like power those campaigns, that each of those campaigns don't have enough bandwidth, and it's probably going to be really hard. It's hard for an SDR that like is sending 30 emails a day to like actually figure out what people need and what's working. So we use email infrastructure that accommodates higher volume for that reason. It's not so that we could spam 20,000 people every day. It's so that we can run ample campaigns, ample testing, and power it. So I know if everyone is struggling, not everyone, but a lot of teams are struggling with like, how do I build the right infrastructure? What do I use? Should I send from Google, from Outlook? All these updates are coming out. What do I do? So it's a good conversation to have. But generally speaking, I'll tell you on the basic side, like we do everything on secondary domains. I still talk to very well-intentioned sales teams that are sending from their main domain, not just to stop doing it. Obviously that affects, if you have some grumpy people that move you to spam in a given day, like your day-to-day emails with clients, with investors, with each other are affected. So like have domain infrastructure, maybe 2 or 3 secondary domains. And I love subdomains, and you would rotate those. So you would have like 2 or 3 subdomains under each domain, right? And you think of it as like a pitcher and like pitchers that are pitching, and then bullpen. You've got subdomains that are warming up. You've got your active pitcher. If that active pitcher's arm gets tired or her arm gets tired, falls out of favor, you tag in the pitchers of the bullpen, and that rotation is critical.
Have you found that subdomains, if a subdomain goes down, it takes down the parent domain, or they're fairly isolated? Because I've run some testing, and it's been a while since I've tested these hypotheses.
Yeah, I find that they're isolated enough. It's not foolproof though. I find that we've done so much testing now that like the parent domain is usually protected, and the sender score isn't affected if one of the 3 subdomains running under it is affected. Maybe if all 3 subdomains are like in really bad shape, there's like probably an issue with the root domain. But I find that you can just tag out that bad subdomain and the root domain's okay. It's still not 100% foolproof. When you use SendGrid, also we use SendGrid as like our either shared IPs or dedicated IPs, and that's another layer of protection. But I would say you still want to operate on secondary domains. So setting up subdomains of your main domain, probably not the best idea. And just get off of Google or Microsoft if you can. Tools like SendGrid, custom servers, things like that will just get you out of Google's ecosystem because they're very sneaky. You know, they'll do all kinds of sneaky things if like they feel like they don't want you. If they feel like you're doing any kind of scaled outreach, they'll do some things to make sure you don't land they'll do some things to make sure you don't even get sent. You don't even land in inboxes, let alone go.
They won't even leave the inbox and
you won't even leave. Yeah. And they won't tell you. You won't get testing on it. So like we have a custom server on the receiving side. We can test IP health like daily, weekly, and say, okay, like this one is actually in pretty bad shape. But if we were sending from Google, we wouldn't have that test. We wouldn't actually know until it's too late. So preventative measures is really important.
Interesting. So you got 3 different domains. Are you setting a different SendGrid account for each of the subdomains, or can you set up multiple domains on a single SendGrid IP? I guess it's not that way. So you're going to have separate SendGrid accounts, aren't you?
We do it so for each client, they would have their own SendGrid account. Sometimes, I have a master like agency SendGrid account. Sometimes I add them onto mine, but we usually just have one SendGrid. It's hard to isolate them. I've asked my CTO about this lots of times, and it's apparently not so easy to like have multiple SendGrid accounts for one client. You can't really do it.
You'd have to have like multiple SendGrid accounts. So it's possible, but you just have to have separate ones all mapped to different domains, and then just replicas. You instead of like 30 different inboxes or accounts, you've got 30 separate SendGrid and whatever tool you're using to send, which would be
it might be a little
possible.
It's possible.
Overkill.
Yeah. I think having like 2 or 3 domains, even if it's on the same SendGrid account, dedicated IPs, or I find shared IPs to be great, and you can power it with a little bit more volume, but you got to load balance. Like just have a little bit go out from each subdomain and have mailboxes, right? The mailbox part doesn't matter. I still see people that have like 15 or 20 mailboxes, and they're like, look, I have 15 or 20 mailboxes, but they're all rolling up to the same domain. So if one gets screwed, the other 14 are screwed too. So have a couple mailboxes on each subdomain, right? And have a couple subdomains that are active any given day. Especially as you add to your sales team. Like anytime you hire somebody new, it should just be part of onboarding to give them their own maybe subdomain. Maybe it's time to set up another domain that they can roll up under. Like email infrastructure is, it's just often ignored, I think, because it's just not well understood.
100%. And I think just to kind of wrap it up here, because we could spend a whole day talking about email deliverability and all the different things. With great ability to send email comes great responsibility. If you can send all of these emails and you're not paying attention to the copy, you're not paying attention to the audience, you can actually, this is the thing that's only happened to me once, and it happened probably 9 years ago. I've been doing this a long time. 9 years ago, we were using our own tool on our own domain that we had created for a client, and they hooked up their own outreach. This is before outreach had like the rev limiters and stuff in there. So maybe it was 8 years ago.
Okay.
And they went nuclear on the volume, and they ended up getting the company name added to like a spam directory.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So what we observed, and we ran multiple tests every time we would set up a secondary domain, and even if it didn't have the company's name in it, as soon as we sent an email that had the company's name or domain in it,
in the body of the email,
anywhere in the email, instantly to spam.
Yeah, I believe it. That's crazy.
I've only seen it once, but you can, if you're doing obscene things and you're not being targeted and you're not being careful, this is the warning label. This is like, hey, you're carrying something that could do damage to your brand. Use it responsibly.
Exactly. 100%. Most people are riding bikes. They're sending just a few emails a day, but if you have like a souped up vehicle, you can cause a lot of damage on the road. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, and that's why going back and assessing, is this actually working? What should we do if it's not working? Like, do not have one boilerplate template that goes out every day all over the place. Like, it's not going to work. But
there's
do it responsibly.
So much complexity now in the targeting and the copywriting and the technical infrastructure that you need. You kind of need an expert. And tell me a little bit about what you all do, Joel.
Yeah. So we focus on our lane, what we're good at, which is cold email, LinkedIn, and now we have some supporting services around LinkedIn only outreach. We do deliverability consulting, implementation, and management, kind of handling like the outbound rev ops piece. But our bread and butter is crafting campaigns, working with clients on ICPs, targets, doing the copy, the A/B testing, managing it on the day-to-day. We don't do cold calling, but we do warm calling. So that's another package that we have, where once prospects are activated, they move down into like a nurture ecosystem, where we warm call, and we have a AI model that we've tested now that can determine prospect sentiment and move them into nurture funnels. And I think that's an important part of outbound that also kind of gets missed. Like, you've activated all these prospects. What happens now? How many of you converted to meetings? So having these nurture funnels that run independent of the rep's ability or follow through, is also a part of what we do now. So,
love it.
Yeah. What else? That's it. You can find me at modernoutbound.com. I share outbound tips almost daily on LinkedIn. So definitely connect with me there.
Right on. And I'll throw a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. Joel, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it was fun getting a chance to chat.
Yeah, this was an awesome conversation. You're one of the pros, so it was really good to speak with you.
Thanks, man. It's always fun having competitors on the show. I hesitate sometimes, but I find it's way more fun. And there's a good community of us that are doing good work. And so, yeah,
we're a tight group. Actually, we're much tighter than we think. What do they call, like, co-opetition?
Something like that. Yeah,
something like that.
We're all like different versions of the same LaCroix kind of thing, right. Different flavors. Yeah. Exactly. But no, I love what you guys are doing. And a book I read when I was starting my business like 4 or 5 years ago was Predictable Revenue. So, big fans of your work. Thanks, man. I'm currently working on Predictable Revenue too. So stay tuned for that.
Okay. I'm all ears. That sounds good.
Yeah. It turns out writing a book is not easy. So yeah, I'm like between 2 years and 6 months into the process, depending on when you want to look at what I actually started on. But yeah.
Good Lord. Yeah. That's a copywriting. Well, you have maybe editors and all that, but like, you probably have a lot of say on that, given your background in writing copy.
Yeah. It's, yeah. Editing for a book is very different. Yeah.
That's a whole other animal.
The hardest piece was like sequencing, getting the outline together and sequencing the learning points of like, okay, this is what the book's going to be about. This is the journey that you're going to take a reader on, and finding product market fit for the book, before I write it. So,
yeah. Well, I'm excited to read it.
It's going to be 4 founders that are new to revenue, and they're running like sales or responsible for revenue for the first time. It'll be, this is the stuff that we've learned running Predictable Revenue. This is what I've learned building. I built 3 startups, and, 2 of them had product market fit. One was really strong, and then we crashed that one. And then, the third one was PR, and that's still alive. And so I've learned a lot along the way. We've also helped some huge companies like with their outbound. And so I've got to see what the best do and what their fast following competitors do, and the kind of the differences between the two. And so we've learned a few things there, and I share it on like sales calls and podcasts and things like that, but I'm finally putting it down into words is a lot harder than just talking on a podcast.
Yeah. Well, that could be a whole other, we could do like a part 2, but no, you're like, no, let's not do that. Yeah, I'm excited to read that and hear about your battle scars and what you learned from it. I think that's what people want to read about anyway. So excited to check it out. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show this week, Joel. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see y'all next week.